Welcome to Focus or Fury, a new debate-styled format that we'll be using. My name is Ryan. I used to be good at Warmachine. Welcome to Spell Rack. We're here with our first episode of Focus or Fury on Spell Rack. In this format, we'll be debating 3 different topics each week. Please do give us your feedback in the comments on YouTube. We'd love to hear what you guys think about what we're debating. And then we would like to revisit those comments in future episodes and kind of keep that as a cycle going. So we'll get started here. Max, first question, is Lord of the Hunt playable?
Yeah, I think Lord of the Hunt is playable. It is a super solo, 9 points. It has a fantastic stat line, 13, 18, 15 boxes, natural tough, natural steady, position 5 built in. It has a place in many of the lists that Old Umbre are playing, but I think it's better in some of the other casters that they're not, especially like Bodan and Galena. It requires corpses in an already tight corpse economy, but the fact that it's able to produce its own corpses at range and it's able to distribute them if it wants, I think it makes the model playable. With Bodan, the Lord of the Hunt is naturally a Rat 7, POW 11 on his Weapon Master range attack. The range attack goes up to 2 range attacks if he has 3 corpses. With Bodan under Insight, it's now a Rat 9, POW 13 Weapon Master. And then with Galena, she offers it on both Pincushion for an additional die, dropping the lowest, and she offers it Refuge, which I think is pretty cool. Refuge, after the model has hit a model, it gets to make a movement, and then it also stacks with reposition because it doesn't end your turn. So the Lord of the Hunt is able to move 8, attack, move 8, repo 5. So incredibly fast model with Galena, a little bit stronger with Bodan, and then at the end of the day, depending on the matchup, it's a 15 box model with tough, and then if it has 5 corpses, you have to kill it twice. It just seems like a very strong model. Definitely the best 9-point super solo 80mm that they've released by far. Gravediggers are punching air. They're upset that their 80mm are nothing compared to this.
Yeah, I hear your arguments on it. It's clearly a good model, and it would be very playable in any other faction. I think Old Umbre is just pushed, right? And Lord of the Hunt is in the same realm as the rest of the faction. It's very powerful. You mentioned Pincushion. Pincushion is effectively +2/+2 on the math. So between Pincushion and Insight, you're roughly a Rat 9 POW 13 in both cases. My issue with this model is, despite how powerful it is, the faction across the board is just that much more powerful. I feel like lists are pretty tight and very synergistic. I worry that despite how powerful this model is, it's not actually going to be able to crack into a list. The faction is powerful, period. I think Maxim is further holding up the faction, taking it from like a 60% win rate to Maxim's closer to 70. And while this model would be very good with Maxim, I just don't see Maxim disrupting the current synergies that it has between Bear Cav and cohort models to bring in something like this. It's a shame to say that a model that could just end the game by killing a caster, a model that is the best 80mm base of any faction, especially Gravediggers, as you noted, because, oh my God, is it a big difference from the Gravediggers? Poor guys.
Absolutely.
I have a hard time seeing it being better than everything else, which is not to say that Lord of the Hunt is bad. It's to say how really maybe pushed everything else is.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I think Maxim definitely has a solidified list that he doesn't want to stray too far from. Bear Cav, Starved, Corpse Engine. It all functions as it is right now. I don't think adding another corpse hungry model to it would be beneficial to that list. But this model allows other casters to have more play, which maybe in a meta that is Aslanov dominated would be nice. But in a meta that is Old Umbre dominated, it could be troublesome to have just another tool in their kit that is very strong and provides a lot to the army in both melee, ranged, and utility.
Moving on to our next topic, we're going to look at what factions we think will over and underperform at the WTC. Our intention here is to discuss factions that will be above or below what their win rates are in the current meta. So, for example, Old Umbry is around 60% win rate. Do we think they're going to be higher or lower? Chimera are in the low 50s, around 51%, I believe. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I think Chimera will be the worst performing faction at the WTC, the Mark IV factions, especially as a spread to their current win rate. I think Chimera has been falling through most of the year, and I think Chimera has largely been solved by the meta. And Shiris herself is the second most represented caster in the event, and she has a 48% win rate. You're going to drop Shiris into all these matchups that know what to do with her, and I feel like she's just going to get crushed. I'm expecting very bad results out of Chimera. On the other side, I feel like Gravediggers will likely overperform. Gravediggers have been on an upswing. I think you have a lot of very competent players at the WTC that know what they're doing. I think they're going to have very well tested and well played Gravediggers lists. It is a good skill expression faction, and so I think Gravediggers are going to come in as one of the higher win rate factions above where their expected win rate is. I think their win rate in the meta right now is around 53, so I definitely expect to see them in the mid to high 50s.
I can agree with that. I definitely agree that Chimera has been on a downtick. They relied on the trike with Sheriff for months leading up to the WTC, and I think people have now kind of solved that problem, like you said. I think a lot of players are moving over to Kyrax and Nixian, which might be their saving grace in the WTC to have those maybe less played casters represented for the faction. I think personally, Crix will be an underperforming army. I think Kythos is another problem that has been solved. I think if you drop him into the right list or maybe the right opponent, he could perform as well as he has been in the last past months. But he, just like Sharis, has been solved, in my opinion. And any list that can deal with any form of defense caster, whether it's Zadaroth, Kythos, Jakes, or even Helith, right? Those defense buffing casters, they all perform the same into them. The overperforming faction that I see would probably be Winter Corps. I think they're a very strong faction in the right hands. They have a couple lists that have been performing. I think that they're kind of like that underdog army. No one expects them. Nobody's prepping for them. So maybe it'll catch a few people by surprise. And it's like a middle of the pack represented army, about 7 or 9 people, I believe. For them to possibly get over 50% of their games in a win is reasonable to me.
I think the faction that's going to be a really big question mark, and I want to hear your thoughts here, is Old Umbry. Clearly, everybody's planning for Old Umbry. However, BTC is a format where lists need to be submitted well in advance. And so you have to wonder how much opportunity people had to gear their lists towards Old Umbry, right? Was the list submission deadline and the ability to properly practice in conflict with each other? And do you think Old Umbry is going to be able to keep their 60% win rate?
Yeah, that's a fair point. I haven't had a time to look over the specific lists based on what I've seen in current day meta, but the list that they had to submit prior to the WTC leading up to it, it could be what's not meta currently, and that might be what saves certain matchups from having to deal with some of the shenanigans Old Umbre can do. Maybe certain players didn't play the Azanov double bear list, or certain other lists that are popular now didn't get to make it into the WC because of list submissions. I still think they're a strong faction. I still think they're going to hover around that 58, upper 50s win rate overall just because of strength. And as long as the players are practicing them, they're still a strong army, whatever you put into it. But maybe not exactly the dominance we're seeing in like solo events where they have a very figured out list that's tailored to what's meta currently.
Yeah. The other one that's a big question mark for me is Dusk. Dusk had 16 players. Dusk is one of the more common factions up there with like Gravediggers and Signar, although Dusk has a lower win rate below 50%. So you have to wonder, you have all these talented players showing up with an army with a below 50% win rate. What do they know that we don't? Myself as a Dusk player, I actually think that Dusk are quite decent. I think the win rate is below what the faction is capable of. And the WTC is a format that allows for list pairings, and you could potentially avoid some bad matchups. So I'm looking for Dusk largely to overperform, But the reason I'm hesitant on that is because there are 16 Dusk players. And so I feel like that many people showing up, expecting that many people to overperform is going to be hard. I feel like Dusk probably comes in the low 50s. If Dusk were only there like 8 or 12 times, I actually would pick them in like the mid 50s because I would figure out that people have really figured out kind of what Dusk wants to do. But given the number of them, it does leave me a little bit worried.
I agree. I think Dusk is a fantastic faction currently. I've seen you play them. They're a very difficult army to deal with. They have a lot of lists. They have a lot of good players. So with the Phantasm, that's a problem on its own. So I can definitely agree with that.
Yeah, Phantasm sure is cool. All right, with that, we'll move on to our last topic. Max, do you think Steamforged Games is releasing new models too quickly?
Yes and no. I think they schedule that they had put out in Adepticon, I believe, this year at the keynote that showed 3 armies released this year. Might have been a bit too ambitious. I think that for the health of the game, they should probably slow down, have a bit more time given to their balance team or playtester group, so that way they can catch some of these problems before they become problems. Distribution-wise, they've mentioned numerous times that they have had to increase their production, their distribution by 8 times. So I just don't believe that they should come out with a statement saying that they have production issues and that turnaround times on made to order items are now like 5 to 7 weeks and then release just a full faction. I think onesies and twosies models like the Phantasm, like the Dusk Orgoth dual box, Kane's dual box, all those, I think those are fine. I think they fit well. They add flavor to existing factions who need it, but I just don't see the reason to put out multiple armies a year and then add Mark III armies into Mark IV with Crucible Guard coming up this month, leading into February, I believe, and then Dark Operations came out this year. It's just a lot for Steamforged to have on their plate, and especially for just balance state. The game's healthy as it is right now, and I just don't think adding more untested, unbalanced things to the game will promote a healthy future for it.
The first point of yours that I want to address is actually one that I didn't consider, and that is the balance of the game and playtesting. I think that you hit the nail on the head. Maybe Old Umbry is not as tuned as it needs to be because the playtest team is kind of being bombarded by the rate that models are being released. And if we had a little bit more of a slowdown, then maybe we could have seen a little bit more tuning in Old Umbry. I think that's a very interesting and valid point. That aside, I have, being kind of new to the game for the last year, I've really enjoyed the pace of models being released. The game feels very alive to me. The meta feels very alive. As I look back through 2025, I know we got a lot of Crix models early in the year, and then we got the Kane box set. That Kane box set got a lot of people talking about how powerful Kane could be, and then we got Gravediggers very shortly after. And the meta just really feels like it's been changing and evolving. That's been so much fun because everything feels unsolved. Everything feels unexplored. It feels like there's so many different pockets to show personal creativity. And then as soon as we think we kind of get something figured out, now that Gravediggers are out, now Kythos comes out, right? And it's a completely different change to the meta. With Kythos comes additional models to Crix. Crix was a mid-level faction, and then all of a sudden Crix jumps up into the high 50% win rates. And so now the meta kind of gets turned on its head. After Crix, Gravediggers, people finally start to figure out Gravediggers. And so the meta has to shift again as people are trying to figure out, how do I solve Gravediggers? The Phantasm comes out, Old Umbry comes out. There's just so many different changes. And for me, it's been a lot of fun seeing how alive the game is. Now, that being said, a living meta with changes in it, I think is very healthy for a game. What I think is not healthy for a game, though, is rules bloat. This is an item that we dealt with in Mark II and Mark III specifically. There were so many models that were released. If you're a new player coming into the game and you're trying to digest the game or the meta, consider just the Mark II factions alone, right? That's a lot of cards. If you then look at the legacy factions that are able to play in modern events, that is a whole nother boat of cards, especially when you add in that the 2 most popular factions are Grimkin and Infernals, and they operate on slightly different systems. That means that the barrier to entry, the knowledge gap required by a new player is significant. So while I do enjoy the pace of models being released, I would like to see Steamforged consider getting rid of some of the legacy armies. They need to do it very carefully, very specifically, looking at Signar, Khador, and Krix. There are 2 Signar armies. There are 2 Khador armies, and there are effectively 2 Krix armies between Necrofactorum and Dark Operations. And so I think those legacy armies could go away, and therefore it lowers the number of cards in circulation that people need to be aware of before going to an event or even a game for fun.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I think the old factions currently are a good thing in the game. I do see that maybe there shouldn't be 4 Signal armies, 4 Cato armies. I think some of those could maybe be trimmed, but all in all, just the ability that returning players have to bust their old armies out of their closet that's been sitting there for about 7 or so years. Try them out at a local event or a local game night, see other Mark IV armies, see new models, prefer those, and then decide to pick those up instead. I think it's just like a gateway into the game with allowing you to not have maybe so much pressure on your budget initially. Maybe taking them out of like a competitive, like an IGQ, saying that certain armies just aren't allowed for the purpose of rules bloat could be an answer. Maybe the 2026 season of Steamroller says that legacy armies are maybe restricted in some way could make sense, but I think just allowing the models to be in the game to help returning players bridge into the game is probably beneficial for the health of the company in the game.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that you're right. With Warmachine kind of coming back to life, we want points of entry to be as easy as possible for all players. If somebody has models and they want to show up to the game store and get a game in, we want them to be able to do that, right? I think on a sort of for fun basis, I think you're absolutely right on letting everything through. I think your point was a really good one, that maybe the Steamroller packet would further delineate the formats. Steamforged Games has taken over Lock and Load, and Lock and Load qualifiers are a thing. So you could sort of have a Lock and Load qualifier format where certain legacy armies are removed. And then you could have like an everything else format where your armies are still allowed. And then if I still own old Signar or old Khador, I can show up to my local game store and feel good about playing it. I also think it's on the players to, regardless of what Steamforged says,
Absolutely.
it is important to help grow and foster your community. And so when that player shows up with old models, even if they're not legal, even if they're not prime models, if somebody shows up with like a legacy army that is Menoth, like stuff that's just not even allowed, let them play at the local game night. Get them interested, get them excited, and then give them a nudge towards one of the newer armies so that they can be supporting the game.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, with that, I think that kind of takes us to the end of our first Focus or Fury Spell Rack episode. Again, leave comments. Let us know what you guys think. We kind of want this to be an open debate for the audience as well. And we will revisit comments in later episodes while we do tackle new questions at the same time. So thanks, Max, for joining. Really appreciate it. And
Absolutely.
we'll talk
Thank
to
you for
everyone
having
next
me.
time.